Of course, it's a pleasure to have everyone, and we were really grateful for you taking the time for the half hour. And we're excited to have you in general so that we can dive into the pitfalls of self-serve analytics and why the virtual data officer is a game changer. Whether you're here to learn or ask questions or simply explore new ideas, we hope you'll find this session valuable and engaging. Over the next 30 minutes, though, let me clarify a bit of an agenda so that you know what to expect. We will talk about the risks and limitations of dirty data, introduce the virtual data officer and its role in data strategy, and real-world examples of how organizations are using virtual CDOs to transform their analytics. On the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a Q&A box, and you can feel free to ask any types of questions, and we will answer them as fast as we can. These questions will only be shared with the Tamer team, so no need to be shy. Now, to introduce ourselves. Well, hi, I am Eleni Partaki. I am a solutions engineering lead at Tamer, and I've been at the company for over 2.5 years at this point. I have a background in machine learning research and human-machine interaction. And for those that don't really know what that is, I really emphasize on visualization and how people are able to perceive data. So focus on things like Tableau and Power BI and Looker, and how that impacts day-to-day activities. And I'll pass it on to Alex to introduce himself.
All right. So I'm Alex Pagan. I'm one of the co-founders of Tamer, originally in MIT's databases lab, where we worked on the Data Tamer project. And over the last decade or so, I've had the good fortune of being able to work on both platform engineering, user experience design, AI applications, and also working closely with our customers to solve some of their hardest data challenges. And I'm really excited to talk about what the future of data democratization could look like with Tamer.
All right, so without further ado, let's get started. Okay, I was at Big Data London last week, and I chatted with a lot of different people, and I think that inspired some of the thoughts that I had about this webinar. I was chatting with a particular company, or a representative, I should say, and they brought up a stat from a couple of years ago where there was a report that about 27% or 30% of organizations were able to make full use of their data to generate actionable insights, even though there was a growing data skill gap cited as a primary reason. I think that after the conversations that we've had, if only about 30% of companies can use their data, there's a larger problem. And I kept thinking of when I used to build visualizations in order to do the testing. You know, you can pick anything. What do you do when there is an outlier? You right click and exclude. So in your experience, what's going on with that? Have you seen anything that's similar?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was reading this study that was published by Fivetran, and they were looking at this publicly available data that Snowflake and Redshift made available when they were talking about like the scaling properties of their data. But they were able to see this really interesting trend when they were attributing the usage to why people were making the queries that they were. And what they found is that like only about 20 to 30% of the actual workload that people are paying for is the kind of workload that would be produced by BI tools or by consumption by data scientists. And that most of it is actually just getting data into the platform and doing the kinds of transformations that people need to make it available downstream. And I kind of see that as a proxy for what you're talking about, like all of the point fixes and reshaping that's required to make data useful. So I think it'll be great to dig into why people aren't getting more value out of these kinds of these applications of their data.
Well then, why?
All right, let's get into it. As the title says, we're going to be talking about the pitfalls of self-serve analytics and how there's a new path forward with what we're going to call the virtual chief data officer. And you'll see more of that later. But to kind of frame our conversation, let's look at the competitive landscape of how businesses have been leveraging data And we're going to start about 20 years ago. I mean, you could start earlier, like this has been happening for quite some time, basically, as long as there have been enterprise databases. But businesses are realizing at this point that there are some competitors, some people in the marketplace that are really getting distinct leverage by modeling their organization's core business processes as data. And we end up with our old friend for the database nerds out there, the star or snowflake schema. And I think like at this stage, the real competitive advantage is having the infrastructure to store and query and start to make data-driven decisions for your business. But as we move forward a bit, the big internet companies have started to become really, really proficient at this kind of data analysis. And as a result of their core business processes, they've built out these really sophisticated distributed systems and started to make them available to consumers so that basically any business can now store and query up to petabytes of data. And that's a real step change. So just having a data warehouse, just storing the data isn't really gaining you that much. You actually need to understand and work the use of that data into the everyday processes of your business. So you start to see companies hiring data science teams and analytics teams, building out dashboards with KPIs, and trying to gain an edge by tying the decisions that they make to all of these data assets that they've built up over time. And that's where you start to see self-serve analytics come into the picture. Because why should only the data teams be able to build out new insights into data? Shouldn't the people who are best contextualized, who have the most information about the questions that they're asking about the business, shouldn't they be able to kind of access all of these assets and build out what they need? But now we're rudely interrupted by the introduction of LLMs and the rapid innovation that we've had in AI. So now everyone's focus is changing to how they can uniquely leverage AI in combination with their data to have a differentiated experience or gain more efficiency. And this is, extremely exciting. Like, this is the first time that we've really seen machines be able to understand and communicate with humans in natural language. But there's a problem. Do we really trust our data? Can you really build these new experiences on top of AI models if we haven't really solved the problems of the last 10, 20 years? So I think that's a good introduction to why we still need to think about why self-serve analytics projects fail and the types of challenges that people run into when they're trying to make data access a kind of a core part of their business.
All right, Alex, to maybe simplify it, depending on who is on the call today, but in essence, you're saying that there's been this entire process of trying to make some sense of the data, and it used to be a challenge for people. It was really isolated in terms of only specific teams, and typically very technical teams could access any results, when suddenly we're seeing an era of, well, what if it's possible for a business user to really start creating the dashboards or getting the answers that they really need? Is that a good understanding?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think that's why data teams are undertaking all of these efforts. They're buying lots of tools. They're building really complex pipelines, ultimately for this holy grail, which is that business users can get these really rich semantic views of their data. And then they don't need to ask a data team, oh, can you please just grab this slice of data for me for this one analytic that I need to do? They can just find what they need and do that themselves. But I think what a lot of data teams have seen is that there's a lot of effort that goes into this. But if the view that they have of the data, or maybe the kind of central view of the data, doesn't exactly match the use case of business users, then you still end up getting these queries, these emails to the data team, like, oh, could you please just find this data for me? And the
Mm-hmm.
answer is sometimes no, but usually it's a lot more complicated than that because you have to
Like
open up the hood of this big machine.
yeah, and get it in a couple of weeks, a couple of months. I heard that before.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't blame a data organization. Like you need to make sure that everything is updated in a timely fashion. You need to do testing. You need to make sure that it actually scales. Like there's lots of considerations that go into this.
Mhm.
But business users need answers quickly, and they can't always wait.
Yeah.
So I, I would like to jump into the next thing, which is that even if this is all working perfectly and you have really easy to understand views of the data, the tools that end consumers are using to build analytics, they're pretty complex. And I think you could probably speak to this from your experience working in data visualization. You can do really amazing things with these tools, but it takes, a fair amount of experience to get comfortable with it.
For sure. I remember, I don't know if anyone here knows about the vast data challenges, but there used to be these data challenges that were published yearly, and you would get these big dumps of data, and you had to make some sense of them, solve some crime, solve some big result. But honestly, most of the time, especially if you don't fully know what you don't know about your data, it was really, really hard to get any result. And as fun as it is to create dashboards, if you don't trust them, it's not very useful.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's worth mentioning is like internally, these tools are competing against maybe the most important language that businesses have had historically for communicating about data, which is spreadsheets. It's hard to beat spreadsheets in terms of simplicity. You can do a lot of things. A lot of people are comfortable working with spreadsheets. But this gets back to what you were just talking about. It's really hard to ensure data quality of spreadsheets, especially once they're shared around and sent to other people. The half-life of data quality basically goes to zero. Like a spreadsheet that you received an email 2 years ago, who knows if any of those values are still correct? And who knows even who originally produced that? So I think it shows that we need something that is both flexible enough so that you can address data quality problems, but also straightforward enough so that it can gain wide adoption within the enterprise.
Hmm.
And finally, data quality is just a constant challenge with self-serve analytics. And this is very relevant to the point that you brought up earlier. We're looking at this trend here shown on a chart. There are a bunch of outliers. What's the default behavior of a lot of BI users? Right click and ignore. And I think that really papers over a lot of really interesting problems that are worth thinking deeply about. But the problem is that there's not really a good way of providing feedback in these analytic tools. So like you end up with a dashboard and it is what it is, right? And in order to understand why the results are showing up a certain way, you really need to get deep into the data pipeline, which often involves, a lot of conversations. And those kinds of conversations, depending on how an organization is structured, can really erode trust in both the data and in the different teams that are providing it.
Hmm.
So where does that leave us? We have overloaded data teams that are managing a bunch of tools and trying to keep up with data quality. We have frustrated data consumers, And eventually, we end up seeing fragmentation in data silos. So different business units wanting to sort of own their own destiny with respect to their analytics and data. But if we're not careful, we can end up with this, which is basically just a bunch of spreadsheets being sent around and no real single source of truth. So I think this is a great opportunity to introduce the virtual chief data officer and show how you can reframe the way that you're thinking about your business's data.
I'm excited for this. I work with customers day in, day out, and I think that this is probably the most exciting part I would find at this point of the webinar.
All right. So I'm going to jump over to Tamer. And to set the stage here, let's say that I'm a sales manager and I'm trying to sell computer hardware to big multinational companies, and I've got this this prospect that I'm trying to work on and find new avenues to sell to them. So I go and look them up in Tamer, and I find the 360 page for the company. It's called ABB Ltd. And just from the start, I can see kind of a wealth of information about them from both our system of record, which is our most up-to-date source of information about them. But I also have a lot of information from external sources that have been matched against this entity. And I also get insight into the upstream data sources that contributed. So there's just so much that I can look at here. And it can be a little bit overwhelming to have like this variety of data. But I think the key thing here is that we can leverage AI in the context of a particular entity that we're interested in, and ask the kinds of questions that people ask, rather than worrying about some complicated SQL query that counts the number of global parent identifiers to figure out if there was a merger. I can just ask, was ABB involved in a merger? And based on the semantic understanding that the AI model has and the data that we've collected, we can see that it was involved in a merger, and we can get some detail about how that came to be. So I'm now thinking about, okay, I have some basic information about ABB. I want to go a step deeper here. So I've decided to consult my virtual CDO, and I know that the sales organization has been interacting with ABB. Someone in marketing sent me a list of leads a little while ago. So I'm going to look that up in Tamer and try to figure out, is there something that we can glean from this list of leads to figure out how we should approach ABB? And what we're doing here is we've sent in just a simple file with the contact information for some of these companies, and we want to get the identifiers so that we can understand all of the linked information and actually make some decision based on this data. Mm-hmm. And you can see here, like pulling this slice of data, it happens in the order of seconds rather than days or weeks like we would have before.
Well, okay, Alex, forgive me for interrupting you here. So, I mean, this is chat interface, and I think that anyone that has been on the internet in the last year has definitely seen things like ChatGPT or maybe anything that popped up from Anthropic or Google pop up. Why use this instead of just ChatGPT and load the data there, or use an API from OpenAI?
Yeah, I think the real answer to this is that models are improving every day. It's so exciting to see the advancement of these AI technologies, but fundamentally, they don't really know about your business, right? Even if we had a really advanced model that could write mathematical proofs from first principles and reason at the level of, say, a PhD student, I think that it's easy to forget that that model doesn't know the preferred shipping address for your customer. It doesn't know about your recent sales transactions. It can't fundamentally ground what it's doing in the reality of your business. And what the virtual data officer allows you to do is very easily leverage all the work that you've done to improve the quality of your data, and provide the context for AI to interact directly with your data consumers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've seen a variety of different customers that are utilizing today across industries. Like if you're thinking about healthcare, oftentimes, first of all, you have very sensitive data. And when you're in the life science space, maybe you have multiple data products that one is associated with organizations and other ones with providers. If there's no space for you to combine the two and really ask the questions, then it makes it difficult. So how is this provider associated with this hospital? Or this other particular office, or things that I've seen in retail. It's really finding the relationships between people. Maybe I have this customer, and maybe I collected some data in real time using the Tamer real-time APIs in an application that I'm using, but I really want to ask questions. So it's definitely a tool that is extremely useful, and thinking about it in an isolated environment, which is within your organization.
And to that point, like the next question that I have is, I want to know what we've actually sold to these companies. And because we've resolved the identity of these leads that just came in a CSV file, we can see that, yeah, we have sold some hardware to ABB recently, maybe not a whole lot, but we've also sold a lot to another company in the list, which is Clariant AG. And what's kind of interesting, these are both Swiss companies. So maybe we could ask the virtual data officer to compare them and kind of leverage all of the information that we see on the 360 page to develop a strategy.
And
I think the joys of live demos.
Interesting. And is this isolated in that particular tenant, like across the board? In essence, how can I get that combination of real world information about a particular company and then it also being combined with my golden records?
So the way that we do this is we have the ability to match against a broad variety of data. So this is already happening behind the scenes. So you don't need to worry about, setting up the pipeline. You can just kind of consume the results of that match. And you can see here that we can actually do like a pretty good one-to-one comparison between ABB and Clariant, and see that, ABB is, a pretty high revenue company. They're both, the result of, some previous merger or some, spinoff from a larger company, and they're both in manufacturing. So I think what we can then, deduce here is that, like, okay, maybe we could contact the salesperson for ABB and see if we could leverage some of the strategy from Clariant. So I'm going to ask our virtual data officer to draft me an email that leverages all of this information.
Well, with you working on that, I'm just curious, what advice would you give to someone just starting with their virtual CDO strategy?
So I think what I would say is don't dive in immediately to building an AI application, right? You have to start with the data quality, right? And that really means starting to think about how you can format your data pipeline so that you have a single source of truth, so that you have some mechanism of collecting feedback, and so that you can make the core parts of the core components of your data stack more directly available to your end users.
Okay, well, I think that, do you think that these have to be, like, are these big changes to go through a data quality process? Like, what does it take for me to get from what I may have in my systems, maybe I have my data in Snowflake, to get to what you're showing me today?
I think the biggest change that needs to happen is starting to think less in terms of batches of data and more in terms of managing data in real time. Because once you have something that is updated continuously, where we can always look up the best and most recent state of a record or an entity in the system, then we have what we need to start making that available throughout the business and offering deep context. And that also includes all the linked information and everything that we can bring together from external data providers. So I think starting to move from this really kind of simple staged pipeline to a real-time world is kind of the key, and everything else follows from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we have a minute left, so just to wrap it up for everyone, and thank you to anyone that has sent any questions. As we've discussed today, self-serve analytics can be both empowering and risky if you don't ensure your data quality is where it needs to be. It can promise data-driven insights for everyone, and we saw what visualizations can do, but without the right structure, it can lead to confusion and inconsistent decisions, and most of the time, missed opportunities with your data. And this is where the virtual chief data officer really makes a difference, bringing in clarity, control, and strategy to your data efforts. It's not just about fixing the mistakes or avoiding the pitfalls. It's really about unleashing that true potential of your data to drive real business value so that the people that traditionally couldn't log in and just, create their own visualization immediately or pull in the data can really make use of the information and the power of the company. So thank you all for being part of the discussion today, and we hope you're walking away with new insights on how the virtual CDO can transform your approach to analytics. And we will send out the recording of today's webinar shortly. And in the meantime, if you do have any additional questions or want to explore the topic further, please reach out to us at tamer.com/demo. And then stay tuned for our next webinar. And until then, take care, and we do look forward to seeing you and any next steps in your data journey. Thank you.